The Super Bowl just happened yesterday. It's Monday. The full NFL calendar is over. It's time to truly start anew for 2025. And it's Monday, Mock Draft Monday. Baltimore Ravens 7-round mock draft. Here we go. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to TTP Ravens Media, bringing you Ravens content every single day. If you want to see that daily Ravens content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. Hit the notification bell as well if we want to get notified every single time I upload a brand new video. In this video today, if you're new to the channel, new to the series, every Monday of the offseason, from when the Baltimore Ravens season ends, and now the season is officially ended, I've put out a mock draft, 7 rounds, no trades, every single Monday for the last 3 years. I've started to really get into the scouting. I'm starting to really find the guys that I like, not just round 1, not just round 2, but some guys later in the draft. But please, as always, let me know your mock drafts of the week. Let me know your thoughts on my picks, and let me know on players you want me to scout for the future so I try and draft them as well. Let's jump right into it. As always, I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking about the 1 through 3 round picks, just because I feel like since we have 11 picks, I'm going to kind of go through the later rounds a little bit faster. So if you want more in-depth analysis, please let me know. I can make them longer, but I think you guys prefer the shorter videos. But starting off round 1, pick 27, I've gone in a couple different directions, but I was watching the Super Bowl yesterday. And the Super Bowl, I'm not going to lie, it went kind of exactly how I expected it to go. But with this draft, I was like, let's take a page out of the Super Bowl champions, the Philadelphia Eagles book, right? How did they win? They won with the trenches. And so I felt like pass rush, offensive line, defensive line, that's what we need. And my favorite pass rusher in the draft that is more than likely going to be available at 27 is Donovan Ezra-Raku. There were other players available. Scorton was available. Princely was available. Landon Jackson was available. But I like Donovan Ezra-Raku more than all those guys. The offensive line players that were available, nothing special. Like Josh Conerly was available. He's fine. I wouldn't be opposed to drafting him. But I love Donovan Ezra-Raku's game out of Boston College. He is explosive off the jump. He has a plethora of pass rush moves. He can win inside. He can win outside. He wins with bend. The question is his size, but he was very good at the Senior Bowl. He was dominant in college, had like 14 sacks last year in the ACC. This is a guy that's going to get production in the NFL. And NFL.com, who puts out their kind of prospect rankings, they always try and put out player comps. And it hadn't been out for a while, but I checked just to see, if they put something out. And they put out a player comp. And the player comp was a former Raven that we all know, Yannick Ngakoue, another guy that's a little bit smaller, but just has a bag of pass rush moves. And don't think of it as, Ravens Yannick Ngakoue. Think of this as prime Yannick Ngakoue, a Pro Bowler. This is that's what you're getting with Donovan Ezra-Raku. Not necessarily year 1, but when you look at what the Eagles have done, right? They've drafted just defensive linemen, and they just continue to produce. And eventually you're going to get that one that turns into the superstar. They got Jalen Carter, and the other guys like Nolan Smith and everybody else were just able to dominate that Chiefs front line with 0 blitzes in the entire game. So fantastic from the Eagles. Ravens, I think they should take out a play out of their book. Next up, round 2, pick 59. I went with Wyatt Millam out of West Virginia. He's an offensive tackle. I learned this guy's better than Cam Williams. He is better. He gave up like 0 sacks in his collegiate career, and he gave up like 1 hit the last 2 years and barely any hurries. Like, this is a guy that has been extremely productive. He has the size, like 6'6". He's over 300 pounds. He has the size to start right away. He has the athleticism to start right away. Obviously, not going to come in and be, he's not the prospect that, a Joe Alt was, but I think he's probably a slightly better prospect than Roger Rosengarten was. And we saw what Roger Rosengarten came in and did. He was fantastic. Wyatt Millam could come in, do a very similar thing. And even if he's a little bit worse than Roger Rosengarten right away, I would still be okay with that because we don't know what we're doing with the left tackle spot. If we draft Wyatt Millam, I'd be fine if we did let go of Ronnie Stanley. But at the same time, we could still keep Ronnie, have him develop under Ronnie, and then start next year, just depending on what the Ravens want to do. But right now, starting left tackles are like $20 million. And we could move Roger to left tackle, have Wyatt play right tackle. Just depends on what the Ravens want to do. Is $20 million worth it for Ronnie Stanley? I don't necessarily think so. So let's get a tackle early. If we don't go round 1, I'm thinking round 2. Round 3, I went with another defensive lineman. I thought about corner. I thought about wide receiver. I didn't love any of the players that were available. And so I went with Deon Walker out of Kentucky. He had a bit of a disappointing season because coming off of last season where he had 8 sacks or 7.5 sacks, it was thought like this guy's going first round. This guy is a freak in nature. He ends up only having 1.5. He's an interior defensive lineman, so it is harder for him to get sacks. But I don't see him as a big sack guy in the NFL. He could get you 5 in the NFL. I think that'll be a good year for him. But he's powerful. He's so big. He's 6'6". He's almost 350 pounds. He's been playing in the SEC. And that's the type of thing that the Baltimore Ravens need on the interior, right? They're most likely losing Michael Pierce to retirement. They have Beaks. They have Travis Jones, both of whom are good pass rushers and are decent against the run. But Deon Walker would bring the size aspect, the one that you could switch in and run situations, the one that you can switch in when you're trying to go physical and bully the other team's offensive line. Deon Walker has the strength, the athleticism, the quickness to be able to do that. This isn't your typical 6'6", 350-pound defensive lineman where they're just, the immovable object. No, this guy's got power. This guy's got speed. He's athletic. Okay. This is a very different football player than Michael Pierce. I love Michael Pierce. Deon Walker has a lot of potential in the NFL. Not saying, he's going to go in right away and just be a dominant force, but he has all the traits, and I think he could absolutely contribute on this defensive line, especially for years to come. Again, looking at that Philadelphia Eagles defense, how they were able to win, 4-man pass rush. They were subbing in guys. Jordan Davis gets a sack subbing in. Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter was like a non-factor. He forced one holding call. But just the whole defensive line, so many subs, so many options, so many different moves, right? You take out Beaks and you put in Deon Walker, right? That's a very different player that you're going up against. You take out Travis Jones, you put in Deon Walker. They're both big and strong. Deon Walker's bigger and stronger, maybe and maybe a little bit quicker, just not as skilled, right? So it's just a lot of different things they'd be able to throw at them. I love Deon Walker in the 3rd round. I think the Ravens have done a very good job developing defensive linemen, especially on the interior. So I'd love to see what we could do with Deon. Next up, I'm just going to go through both the round 4 picks. I went with Torrey Horton and Connor Colby. I don't know why I was having kind of a tongue twister there. But Torrey Horton, wide receiver out of Colorado State. Connor Colby, guard out of Iowa. Starting with Torrey Horton, this is a 6'3" wide receiver. He was the number 1 wide receiver for Colorado State. However, he did have a knee injury. This guy was thought of as potentially a round 1 pick coming off of last season. More likely round 2, but he ended up getting hurt, missed a big chunk of the year. However, he has what the Ravens are looking for. He's got size. He can go over the middle. He's typically an X, but he does play out of the slot every once in a while. He can get the seam ball. He can catch, run after the catch, right? He's not the shifty Zay Flowers. However, again, he's good in what Lamar Jackson likes to do, right? The hitches, the slants, the drags, the quick seams, right? Not deep balls, but the quick seams. We see that a lot with Isaiah Likely, where Lamar Jackson maybe does a hard play action and then hits Likely, 20 yards down the field on the seam shot. That's what Torrey Horton can kind of bring to this team. And I really love his game. I think he's a baller and, smaller school, but very productive there. And, depending on when he'd be able to start with his injury, we don't know wide receiver 3. Torrey Horton, I'd be very happy with as a wide receiver 3. And again, he could develop into a star. And then obviously Connor Colby, guard out of Iowa, 6'6", over 300 pounds. He's a better run blocker than he is a pass blocker. He did give up a couple of sacks last year, but he's been a starter for multiple years. He's somebody that I feel like the Ravens need on that offensive line. He's more athletic than a Daniel Faalele. And again, we just don't know what we're doing with the guards. We don't know if we're keeping Makari. We don't know if we're keeping Faalele. We don't know if we're keeping Ben Cleveland. Just so many question marks. And I think Connor Colby would just help come in and compete because we know at least he can run block. And if you can do that from an early set, right, the Ravens have been pretty good at helping guards with their pass blocking. And he's not a big developmental guy like Falele was. I think a lot of people forget, like, oh, we're drafting a guard that's not amazing at pass blocking right away. Falele was the most raw possible prospect you could draft in the NFL. And the Ravens did a really good job turning him into a Pro Bowl alternate in his first year as a starter at his not even like designed position. Next up, going into round 5, projected 5th round pick. I went with Jalen Smith out of USC. He was their slot corner. He was very good in terms of limiting passer rating against him. However, I'm going to be honest. I asked my buddy who's a USC fan after the fact, and he was like, "Yeah, sorry, not the best pick." So I just want to get that out there. Might not necessarily be the best player to go after, but played in safety, played in the slot. They moved him around a little bit. He was a starter for multiple years. He's a little bit undersized, like 5'10", like 175, 185. But Marlon Humphrey is aging. I'd like to see Marlon move outside a little bit. Again, I'd like him as a consistent slot corner, but we don't know what we're doing with Brandon Stevens. He's probably leaving. Jalen Smith would not replace Brandon Stevens. I think, we're looking at TJ Tampa. We're looking at potential free agency targets. We're looking at other guys on this depth chart. But having a guy in the back end of our depth chart where, hey, he can play slot, he can play safety if we need, as that, 4th string safety, as that backup slot corner, could be potentially good. Next up, round 6, we got 4 picks in the 6th round. I went with Jay Higgins, RJ Mickens, Logan Brown, and Oronde Gadsden the second. Starting off with Jay Higgins. Jay Higgins out of Iowa. This is the perfect linebacker for the Baltimore Ravens. This is a will linebacker that is very good covering the pass. He can stop the run. He's physical. He's not the greatest athlete. He's about an average athlete. So I know the Ravens love sideline to sideline, but this whole defense is so fast. I think I'm more concerned with getting just a good pass coverage linebacker, because that's what we were really missing, right? When you look at Chris Board, he's not the best athlete. He's not sideline to sideline. He's smart, right? He knows how to use his athleticism. He knows when to be physical. That's what Jay Higgins does. He's just a lot younger. And I'd love to see him, compete for that, that will linebacker spot, or even just be a special teams player, learn under Roquan Smith, learn under Zachary, or learn under all these great defensive pieces that we have, right? Chuck Pagano, Dean Pease, and such. I think he could end up being a stud in the NFL. That's somebody that I really like in this draft class. And again, I think he fits perfectly with what the Ravens are needing. Again, 5th, 6th round pick, not necessarily just start right away, but it is a position of need. He would compete for that starting job. RJ Mickens, then out of Clemson, is a, do it all kind of safety. He can cover, he can tackle, he can stop the run, he can play high, he can play in the box, he can play in the slot. I've drafted him before. You guys have heard me talk about him. I think he's a baller. I think in the 6th round, it's great value getting a player with his kind of production at Clemson. And so I don't want to talk too much about him. I think he's a stud. You guys know that. I think that. Next up, Logan Brown, tackle out of Kansas. Very productive. I think he had 0 sacks. I think he had 1 hit allowed in his college career. It might even be 0 hits allowed. And then some hurries at Kansas. But that's incredibly impressive for, again, a Big 12 school. This isn't somebody coming out of a really small school. Big 12, not necessarily the best conference, but still a Power 5 conference. And he was doing very good work there. And so having a, productive tackle that's over 6'6", over 300 pounds coming into the NFL, I'd love to add that to our team, right? Him and Wyatt Millum, both guys that were very dominant in the Big 12 together. So, I'd love to get both those guys in the building, help work on their technique. Again, have them fighting for backup spots, have them fighting for that starting left tackle spot. I think Wyatt would obviously be the better player right away, but getting another backup offensive lineman that's, again, been very productive. He's been dominant. I think that would be really smart. And then Oronde Gadsden, I've drafted him before. 6'5" tight end, very good pass catcher, has the right frame to be a blocker. Not necessarily a blocker yet, but again, when you look at past Ravens tight ends they drafted, Mark Andrews was not a blocker. He's a blocker now. Isaiah Likely was definitely not a blocker. He's a blocker now. Isaiah Likely was terrible at blocking in his first preseason game. And he was after his rookie year, he was rated as one of the best run blocking tight ends in the NFL. Run blocking is about effort and technique. The Ravens are fantastic at developing that in their tight ends, and we don't know who we're keeping at tight end after this year. All three of them are up for contract. So you guys can comment, oh, trade Mark Andrews or trade Likely. It's not what this video is about. This video is me saying we need a fourth tight end because if they all leave, we're screwed. And then finally, round 7, pick 245. I thought about going quarterback. I thought about going kicker. But I ended up going with a running back, kind of a developmental running back, Raheem Sanders, 6 foot, 230 pounds. He's going to be a between the tackles runner. He doesn't have the athleticism to be a do-it-all running back. But, if Derrick Henry ever goes down, knock on wood, having a guy like Raheem Sanders as a backup, because Justice Hill isn't a, power back. Keaton Mitchell's definitely not a power back. So just getting that guy in the building, learning from the team, I think would be really smart to learn from Derrick Henry. Again, this is not Derrick Henry, but he is a bigger back. It would be nice to have a big back as a backup in addition to Justice Hill. That's going to be the entire mock draft. Let me know your thoughts, your opinions, your favorite player I drafted, your least favorite player I drafted, and your mock draft down below. I love reading your guys' mocks. You guys send me some great ones. Thank you all so much for watching. Subscribe for more. And I'll see all of you again tomorrow. I will be talking about Derrick Henry. It should be a lot of fun.